Welcome to the world of Priesthood Dispatches, where we tell your stories from the front lines of high-demand religion.
Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm PD. Please like and subscribe, share this video wherever you feel comfortable. I've just got off a call with Valerie Hoyle, who was fantastic. Her story, she's amazing. She's a lass from Rochdale, which is in northern England. She lives near the greatest place in God's own country that is called Yorkshire. Not quite in Yorkshire, so close but so far, Valerie. But let's get to her story now. Some of the volume might be up and down a little bit. We had a few audio issues during, but hopefully it will be spot on. So, Valerie, can I ask, how did you become a member of the church?
Well, I became a member of the church 2.5 years after my mother did, because she worked in a factory as a weaver, and the man asked her, well, my mother was a Sunday school superintendent at the Church of England, and she used to talk about it because she loved working with children. And my mother was also a dancer. I never said that. She was a choreographer and dancer. Anyway, so this man said to her, you look like an intelligent woman. Would you like to hear about the Mormon church? And my mother said, well, tell me a little bit. And he said, well, I'll just tell you a bit, but I could send the sister missionaries to you. And he had to explain what they were, you know. So they went to her. At the time, actually, they taught about a marvelous work. They taught out of marvelous work and a wonder.
Okay.
So at the time, that's what my mother joined church after reading, studying a lot of that. And I was allowed to be baptized when I was 12, which was 2.5 years later, because my dad said he wanted me to know what I was doing, you know.
Yeah.
Which I think I wanted to be baptized because he didn't want me to, as children do.
Yeah, stubborn.
So I was baptized by Stanley Smedley, and I was confirmed by Joseph Fielding McConkie, the son of Bruce R. McConkie. But at the time, my mother started studying about the church. She went to her vicar. It was called the Reverend Dobson Peacock. He called him Dr. Peacock. Anyway, he said to my mother, or she went to him and said, Dr. Peacock, I started reading about the Mormon church, and I've been reading this Book of Mormon. Have you heard of it? And he said, yes, I've heard a lot about it.
I bet,
and
yeah.
I said, oh, what do you think? He said, well, Maureen, I don't think you know, but before I became a vicar in St. Luke's here, I used to be an archaeologist, and my field of study was Central and South American history and archaeology. He said, and I have read the Book of Mormon, and I want you to know that nothing in the Book of Mormon pertains to my studies in Central and South America. There's nothing in the Book of Mormon happened in those countries. It just didn't. And he just shook his head because he was just a bit flabbergasted that I think that she would believe it, you know, because they were quite close. Anyway, my mother went back to church and to the missionaries and asked them, told them what had happened, and said, and they said to her, well, we know a lot more than he does about the Book of Mormon. We have the Spirit. He doesn't know what we know about the Book of Mormon. So my mother believed the missionaries and believed the people of the church, and she joined the church, you know, because of that. She didn't tell me this till about a year or two before she died. and it was in the throes of the beginning of Alzheimer's. So I think she was thinking of things that used to that she could remember from years back. And she said to me, "What do you think about that?" I said, "Well, I don't know, Mother. I just laughed." But then she went off into some kind of craziness that she was with her Alzheimer's. But I thought that was a particularly interesting story.
I love it
You
how
know.
at church we automatically assume that the opposition that we know more about a topic than the opposition without ever knowing what the other person actually knows, without
Yeah,
sitting down with them and saying, okay, you explain to me what you know, and then I will tell you if I know more. It's just no, we know far more than he could ever know.
yeah,
Whereas,
yeah. It's like missionaries when they say we'd like to share a message, of the gospel. When they post online, would you like to have a message that might bring love or hope into your life? Well, why do they assume that we don't have it?
yeah,
Why
yeah,
do they assume that we don't know every message? They
because
could
as President Nelson said, you can only experience true joy inside of the church. How rude is he?
When I was in Salt Lake, and I went to Sunstone a few times, we was all sat around chatting away during a lunch break, and this elder, he was called something Bassett, I don't remember his name. And I said, "I remember you." And he said, "What do you mean?" He says, I said, "I'm from Rochdale." He said, "I was on a mission there." I said, "I remember you." He says, I said, "I was 9.5 when you baptized my mother in the church." I said, "And I remember you wore a brown suit and brown shoes." She says, "How can you possibly remember that?" So I met the man that actually baptized my mother. And after I got baptized, Joseph McConkie, my mother was very friendly with the McConkies because she'd read everything Joseph Fielding Smith had written. We had tons of church books, which I also read as of interest, because I was just a reader, a voracious reader. And I kind of, even at such a young age as 12 and 13, I wanted to know what it was all about. And Mormon doctrine was a big book in our house. Anyway, one day my mother got a telephone call and said, from Bruce R. McConkie, because she'd become friendly with them, with the McConkies, and with Amelia, Bruce R. McConkie's wife. And my mother got really excited and said, "Bruce R. McConkie's coming for tea."
Hey,
And I said, "Oh, okay." So they went to the airport to pick him up. So he must have flown into Manchester just for tea, right? So he came for tea, and I just thought it odd. He was a very tall man, but after we'd eaten, he got an apple out of the fruit bowl and ate the whole thing. And I said, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "Well, I didn't want to waste any fruit." Anyway, they went back. My mother took him back in the car to the airport, and on one visit to America, my mother was talking to Amelia after Bruce died, and Amelia, they were talking about him, because my mother said how sorry she was. And Amelia said he just couldn't understand how come he got cancer. He couldn't understand how come it was going to kill him. This was years ago. I think was it colon rectal cancer or something to do with
something like that, yeah.
something like that. And he couldn't understand how come this was going to kill him because he lived a church life all his life and
Yeah.
loved the word of wisdom. He just couldn't understand it. It was very upsetting for the family.
Yeah, I'm sure I remember a talk before he died where he was speaking about God knowing our days and not something about our days not being numbered any less or any more than God means them to be. And maybe that's kind of how he came to terms with it, that it's
Yeah,
God's timing and not his. and the oath and covenant of the priesthood had done everything it could to help him out. But yeah, it seems sad.
Yeah. They actually went to Australia on a mission, the whole family, through Simon County,
Okay.
because they sent us. I have a boomerang somewhere from him. I don't want to get rid of it because my mother treasured this boomerang, you know.
That truly is the stick of Bruce. You have the original
Yeah.
stick of Bruce.
It's stuck upstairs in my art room. We have a small bedroom that's where I painting.
Oh my gosh! If Valerie, can you bequeath that to me in your will? Yeah, I'm sure it'll be 20 or 30 years before you slip off this mortal coil, young lass. But if you can just put in Priest of Dispatches gets the stick of Bruce. That's my one request in life. I want to write on it stick of Bruce and hang it.
I don't think my brothers or any of their family, they're not savers or keepers, you know.
No.
Who knows, one day you might get a package in the store.
The stick of Bruce, fantastic.
People with money got better callings. And both my parents worked, and we lived in a big enough house, and we had a car and a telephone and a fridge, which most people didn't. You know, so when they decided who they were going to choose for the State Relief Society president, they decided, well, who has a phone and who has a car? Because if they don't have those, they can't be the State Relief Society president.
Correct.
Because how are they going to do the job? So she was called. So frequently I'd go around with her to keep her company, you know, when she went to different places, because it were kind of long drives to many places, you know.
Yeah.
So when I became 21, I decided, well, when I was 20, I decided to repent. So, and I broke up with my boyfriend, which we've been going out for about a year and a half, 2 years. So I decided to repent, and I got called on a mission to Italy.
Okay.
So
which part of Italy?
It was all one mission at the time. So I was all over. I was in, well, I flew to Milan and then caught the train to Florence. And then from there, they sent me to Geneva, and my first companion couldn't speak English. She was Spanish and spoke Spanish and Italian. So I had to kind of learn how to be a missionary from somebody that couldn't communicate with me, you know.
Well, the gift of tongues and all that, they don't think they don't think you need any help. They just think that the Spirit will do it, don't they?
Yeah, it was bonkers. Then they sent me to Verona, and then where did I go then? Oh, then to Catania in Sicily. I flew there, and then to Palermo in Sicily, then to Taranto in southern Italy, and then to Torino and Milano.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So were missionaries routinely getting called from the UK to leave the UK at the time, or was that a surprise to you?
It was a surprise. I believe I was told I was the first. And then years later, some missionary that was English said he was the first to go to Italy, you know. And I don't know. I think I sent him a letter saying, no, you weren't. That was kind of funny to me, you know.
No, you weren't. I love it.
Yeah, one of my companions in Taranto was Frances Hinckley, Gordon B. Hinckley's niece. She was one of my companions. I don't know what happened to her. Somebody said she was going blind. I don't know what happened to her. And that's where I met my husband in Italy. I met him in Catania in Sicily.
Okay, was he a member there?
No, he was an Italian missionary from Seattle.
Okay.
So I guess we kind of flirted as you do, you know. If there's a bit of chemistry, you know, it's inevitable, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, So we wrote to each other a couple of times, and then I called the mission president and said, "Oh, I've done something really wrong. I've written to that Elder Chivera." The mission president just laughed at me. He said, "Well, don't do it again." He was President Christensen. He was a good president. When I got there, it was President Dunn, whoever he was, but he got sent home for some reason. It was just a bit strange. And then after President Christensen left, it was Hartman Rector who became our president for a short time.
Ah, Brother Rector.
Yeah, he was interesting. Anyway, on the way home from my ex-husband's mission, he got permission to go to Rochdale. So he had to have a traveling companion. So they turn up in Rochdale, and my parents are really quite happy to see him. So they sit down after the evening meal, and Elder Chivera asked my parents if he could marry me.
Wow, that's quick.
I didn't know he was going to do this, because I thought we were just like friends, And
Yeah.
besides, I told you I have ADHD, don't I?
Yeah.
And so sometimes things don't register in my brain, or occasionally, I'm better at it now, I don't see the consequences of my actions sometimes. Well, I did it worse then anyway. So I guess I must have led him on. I don't recall. So my parents said, "Yes, you can marry her." So I get home off my mission, and my parents told me this. So when are you going to America? They said. I said, "I don't have any idea." And they said, "Well, is he going to send you the ticket?" I said, "I have no idea." I didn't think he came from a wealthy family because his father was a member of the church, but his mother was totally inactive.
But
and his father was of Italian descent,
Yeah, but so he'd asked your parents if he could marry you, but had he asked you to marry him? So
No, because he didn't want to break the rules, did he, on his mission?
So how did you find out? Was it from your parents?
Yeah, the first night I got home.
Oh my gosh.
And my mother said, "You better get up early in the morning because you need to go to the fabric shop." And I said, "Why?" She says, "To buy material for a wedding dress." So the next day, second day of my mission, we go to the store and buy material and pattern. So then I just, when you get off your mission, you just kind of feel like you're pushed around.
Yeah.
You don't have much direction because it's an alien. Wait, sorry. I've got cats and I'm allergic to cats.
seems a futile thing to actually have them and be allergic to them.
Just it's the stupidest thing. Anyway, I've got one here and one cat there. So it took a few weeks before my mother came to the realization that Carl, they used to call him Paddy, because he was half Irish English.
Okay.
So till it came to the realization that he wasn't going to send me a ticket because they didn't have any money, right? So because I don't think his dad paid for his mission. I think his ward paid for his mission, whereas my mother paid for my mission. 100%.
Wow.
And she was a weaver in a factory, and she insisted on paying for the mission because that was the right thing to do,
Yeah.
And it drove her to having a prolapse and being in the hospital. Anyway, so what happened was that my mother said, "Well, I guess I'm going to have to pay," because I think she just wanted to get rid of me. We just never got along very well, my mother and I.
Wow.
Our characters were very different, but she did teach me a lot about the church because she just loved to read, at 9 o'clock, that was the time my dad went to bed to read in his books in bed, whereas she stayed downstairs and she read all the church books. And therefore, she discussed everything she read with me, you know. So I knew a lot about the church, even more than the missionaries I met on my mission, because I think, why don't they know this and why don't they know that, you know? And then I had a few say to me, well, who told you that? You know, how did you learn those things? I said, well, because my mother taught me, you know, out of the church books.
Yeah.
You know, so when eventually I did leave the church, I never had read any anti-Mormon literature. I'd just read Journal of Discourses.
That'll do it.
You know, because visiting my parents at one time, I didn't have anything to do, and somebody bought me a ticket to go and see them when I'd got children then. And because I think my parents had sent me a ticket because they thought I needed a rest. And they didn't like the way my husband talked to me. He was very narcissistic and domineering. So they thought I needed a rest, so I had nothing to do, so I read all the books. Anyway, so I ended up in America, right, with a wedding dress in my bag and not many clothes. So
I'm sure if the immigration officials had opened your suitcase, they'd have had a question about your packing style.
Yeah, well, actually, when I went to Liverpool to get my American visa, they said, why are you going there? I said, well, I'm going to get married.
They say, don't tell the Americans that.
Yeah, it was, you see, it was 1971. Things were a bit different, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I got my green card like 2 weeks after I got married.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah, real quick. Anyway, so I get there and he says, well, we have to drive to Salt Lake City to get married. And I'm thinking,
From Seattle?
Yeah, he said, because I've got to join the military, my number's up. It was conscription.
Okay.
So I went along with everything. I just didn't know what else to do, you know. And I do think, you know, in retrospect, that I actually left because I was running away from my mother. She was very domineering, you know.
But it sounds like they trafficked you. It's like, it sounds like they trafficked you. Like your parents had an agreement with this fella in America that you were gonna go get married, and then just they made you a dress, put you on a plane, and said au revoir.
Yeah, but you see, I got off my mission and like 2 or 3 weeks early because there were a surplus of sisters, and the mission president said to me, would you like to go on a few weeks early? And I said yes. So I called my mother and she says, what did you do to get sent home early? I said, I'm not really getting sent home early, Mother. We have a surplus of sisters. So I arrive at the airport and walk towards them, and they didn't recognize me until I got right in front of them. I'm going back on this, but it was perfect. So I get in the car and my mother's like, what do you think I should do about Frankie? That's my brother, who's 2.5 years younger, and they wanted him on a mission, right? My mother did, because my dad didn't join the church then. I said, well, what's the problem? Well, he's got a girlfriend and they're very quite serious. And I said, well, why don't you just let him sort it out himself? You know, it's his problem. Let him sort it out himself. I didn't know what else to say. And she says, you should have never come home. I wish you'd have never come home. I should have known better than ask you for advice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh.
So it was sad all the way home. So you can see why I kind of wanted to leave and why I was propelled into leaving, because it was just a nightmare. Those few weeks, well, a month or two that I was at home after the mission, because I had no idea how to behave. You know, I didn't know what to say. I'd changed. I wasn't as scatterbrained. Anyway, so I end up in America, and Carl's saying, yeah, we need to drive to Salt Lake, but we have to drive and not stop in a hotel or anything because we're not married.
Oh.
So we drove. Right. So we drove for 14 hours and we got to Salt Lake, right? And so we had to get our license and everything. And I said, well, my patriarchal blessing didn't say what tribe I was from. So when I asked Hartman Rector, the mission president, why did he do that? He says, well, the patriarch shouldn't do that. It shouldn't have done that. So when you go to Salt Lake, if you're going, go to the church office building and ask to speak to Elder G. Smith. And I knew he was the church patriarch. And he said, well, he might just interview you then and give you a patriarchal blessing. So I said, okay.
So did you get two?
Pardon?
Did you get two then?
Yes. So we get into Salt Lake. We have a few hours to spare before our appointment to get married, which was at 7 o'clock at night. And before we'd set off, I had long black hair, right? I'd wash my hair and I'd put it in braids. Because there's nothing to do in the car for all that time. So I just put all these braids in my hair. So we get to Salt Lake and my hair's dry, so I take all the braids out. So what do I look? Poof! Yeah. My hair goes normally. And so we get in for me to see Elder G. Smith, and he said, is there a reason why you don't have your tribe? I said, no. And he looked at my hair and I said, not black, you know. I said, this is because I put my hair in braids. He said, all right, then good.
Oh my gosh.
That's what, you see, that's how I kind of used to be, and I'm not quite. I just say whatever came into my mind. Because I thought he's looking at me. I've got a dark skin because I've been in the sun, right? And I've got fuzzy hair. So I thought he's going to think I'm black. So I just blurted it out. Anyway, so we got married. And how many weeks after my mission was that? Like about 8 weeks. And it was about 10 days after I got to America. So I'd never really been on a date with Carl before we kind of I'd stayed at his house, but I didn't know him. I didn't know this man, you know.
So the first date was the honeymoon.
Pardon?
The first date was the honeymoon.
Yeah. I'm kind of glad because, you know, during the 60s, it was a wild time. So you weren't exactly, chastity wasn't in your mind. You know, it was just a wild time. And so I don't know how I would have behaved if we would have shared the hotel room. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if I'd have had any restraint because of how the life I'd led for about 5 years during the 60s. I don't know what I'd been like, knowing me.
So
you know, so
if we just circle back quickly, two patriarchal blessings. Was there anything that contradicted one another?
No, except we told Elder D. Smith we were getting married later that evening, and he said in the patriarchal blessing, one day you will meet someone that will take you to the temple.
Oh dear.
But I think at the time he was kind of like when I asked if we could see him, he said, sure, I don't have anything to do. I think he was kind of losing his faith, you know, so he didn't remember something. He was a very, very nice man.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he was the last one, but soon after they phased out the church patriarch and they don't have one anymore.
He was the last one.
He was.
It usually was the eldest son, you see, in that line, because it was the patriarch. But his eldest son was gay.
Well, I think
that was my take on it.
I think they had to get rid of them because of the power. Like they, the church patriarch was supposed to have a certain level of power that was equal to the apostles, I guess. And they didn't like that, so they thought, well, we can't have our power being questioned, so we'll get rid of them.
Yeah, it was awful, It's one of the vestiges of the old church.
Yeah. So how long did this wedding to Carl last? Or not the wedding, but the marriage?
28 years.
Wow. I was really expecting you to say just a few months. 28 years. That's
5 children.
5 children, all in the States, or did you come over here?
No, one died.
I'm sorry.
When he was 10 years old in an accident. And when I left, I went to Salt Lake because I thought he would follow me around. So I left and I left him and about the church at the same time and went to Salt Lake because we'd done 20 years in the military and we got back to Seattle, right, Tacoma. And so I stayed with friends, and I knew I left all the kids, I left everything. And he stood in the front of the garage. He said, well, what about your stuff? Don't you want any of this stuff? I said, why would I want any of this stuff? It was just stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't need stuff. You just need clothes. And if you've got money, you can just buy them. Anyway, a friend of mine paid for my ticket to Salt Lake, and I stayed between Carol, that was from Rochdale, who was the active and the Relief Society president, and Rita, who was originally from Timperley in Cheshire, and she's still in America. Anyway, so I stayed between them, and one day they said to me, Carol said to me, you've got to get a job. Because I couldn't function. I've been used to mission, being married. I couldn't function, So one day I just got up, I went out to the house, I got me a flat, and I got a job. I got back late in the afternoon. I said, okay, Carol, I got a job and I got a flat, so I'll be leaving. But I didn't move that way because I was frightened that he was going to follow me, and harass me.
Yeah.
Because when I worked, at one point I was the manager of a deli, and he used to follow me, used to wait in the car outside and watch me. I didn't know this, and my boss, Jim, said to me, what's your husband doing over there? I said, what are you talking about? He said, do you know when you work? Because I used to work 6 till midnight. He said, he watches you all the time. I said, what? So it scared me, so I thought, I better leave, I woke up one morning and I thought, okay, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of the husband. I've had enough of the church. I'm leaving.
Enough of this bag of spanners.
Pardon?
Enough of this bag of spanners.
Yeah, I just had enough. Because I'd got up at the testimony meeting and bought my testimony. So I'm in the middle of talking about Joseph Smith, and I start to cry a bit, like people do. And I thought, what's wrong with me? I just thought, what's wrong with me? This is ridiculous. So I finished the testimony, sat down, and I thought, how weird was that? Because I knew at that point that this was all rubbish. I just knew it, it was just, and people say, well, what did you read? What caused you? I just had enough.
So was there anything particularly in the Journal of Discourses that stood out to you?
Yeah. Nothing anti-Mormon. It was just something that was significant to me. Which base, during the time I was married and my husband was in the Air Force, we'd gone to different bases, and I'd always take classes with the University of Maryland. And one of them was about, I did a lot of psychology, and one of them we studied Jung and about his, the theory of common consciousness. Anyway, I was reading the 11th book in the Doctrine of Discourses when Wilford Woodruff gave a talk. We English was very similar, that we have a common consciousness. And that kind of hit me, you know, really strongly, because I'd always thought that we relate to people because we have something in our consciousness that relates to other people. Anyway, that has nothing to do with why I left the church, but I just thought that was an important thing for me in later years, you know, after that, because it gave me the idea that we were all linked together in some way. And I think that must have given me strength through the years, thinking of that. And my brother said to me, I gave him the books when my parents died, and he said, the 11th book, because there's like 27 books, I can't find the 11th book, and I felt guilty because the only thing that I got out of those, except for thinking there's a lot of mad men giving talks, nobody speaks about absolutely insanity. And I thought maybe I stole the book, but I can't find. It's not in the house. I don't know where it is. Anyway, you asked if my kids left, so I left my children, and I knew they would follow me, and of course they all did. They followed me to Salt Lake, and we all went from Salt Lake to Rochdale. Except my son came over, then he went back 3 weeks later because he got this girlfriend that he missed. They ended up getting married, but he ended up leaving her. Anyway, they all came. My son lives with me, and I have two daughters that live in the same court area. My youngest daughter's married and lives in Newhay, which is halfway between here and the moors. So none of them are active. None of them believe in church. The first thing I said to Matt was years ago, well, do you believe in the church? Because he had more time in the church, you know. And he said, no, I don't. I don't believe in organized religion. And then he became an atheist, you know. That was the first thing he said. And I hadn't thought whether I'm an atheist or what do I believe, what I don't believe. I just wanted to leave it behind. And when he said that, I thought, actually, yeah, I agree with you. And then we both became atheists.
Yeah. Well, it seems like a common trajectory coming out of Mormons. I think a lot of people get upset when we don't just become Christians or go to another Christian church. And I'm like, look, I've had that much crazy in the last 30 years that I don't even need like little crazy or like little supernatural. I just need none, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I can't. My brother, he's in the Preston Temple presidency, and he said to me one day, I think he brought some money over for my birthday.
in the current presidency?
Yes, Frank Hoyle.
Okay. No, my dad will probably know him.
Pardon?
My dad will probably know him. He was the previous temple president.
Oh. Yeah, everybody in the church seems to know my brother. And his wife. I have a younger brother, 10 years there, active in the Middleton ward, but I think, anyway, Frank said to me, I said, oh, I enjoy him working the temple. He said, yeah, it's the happiest I've been in my life. No, I had to stop saying what I wanted to say because he's got like 7 children and 24 or 25 grandchildren. And he's telling me the happiest he's been is in the temple, you know? And that kind of, and I just said, I thought, shut up, Valerie, don't say a word. But I just said, right then. And he said, it would be nice to see you there one day. I just laughed and I said, right then, Frank. He laughed too, because he does have a sense of humor. But I just can't imagine it.
Well, you you will have gone through the temple pre-1990. Was that before your mission?
Yeah, once before my mission. Yeah.
How did you?
And not that many times when I was married, because we didn't live close to a temple, and I have allergies, and when you go into the temple, the air is kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very stale.
Yeah, and I'd fall asleep,
I think
and so what's the point in going if you fall asleep?
that's like a thing. Like they can get people to keep doing it over and over again if that's the only time they get a really good daytime nap.
Yeah.
Put something in the air. So how did you feel, I guess, about the death oaths and different things at the time?
Well, nothing's explained, especially then. Even less was explained. I didn't go to any temple prep classes. It was just like, oh, you've got your temple recommend. There's a bus going on Friday, so you can go then.
Yeah.
Because my mother didn't go because she was married to a non-member.
Yeah.
Even as the state religious society president, she hadn't gone to the temple. The only time she went to the temple was she had to get special permission when she had stopped working in being a weaver, and she'd gone and worked for making the garment in Manchester.
Yeah.
And she had to get special permission to work there, you see, to make garments. And then the office manager.
So
just ask me.
Did she ask you when you came out, like what happened, or?
No. You see, my mother would never have dreamed of asking me.
Super devout.
She didn't even ask me, did you like it? Because when I was there, I was like, what? What? And they asked me. They told me so little that when it was time for the prayer circle, they asked me to go up. And I said, well, all these are married. Oh, we'll find you a single guy to stand next to you. So they did. And I'm like really freaking out, like, because in my brain, not knowing what to expect, I thought, am I supposed to marry this man? Because I stood in the prayer circle with him.
Oh my gosh.
He wasn't attractive.
Maybe that used to be the trap for the brethren. That's where the prayer circle came from. Just call the sisters up, and any sister that stands next to you has to marry you.
I don't know, but he wasn't. I've always been a bit superficial. My ex-husband was very good looking. and because I used to think, if you're going to wake up next morning, it better be somebody that looks good.
Yeah, you can't marry someone who you're not attracted to just because they've got a great testimony. When you roll over in the morning, you look at them and say, darling, please bear your testimony to me. Make you feel better about it.
I said to a lady afterwards, am I supposed to marry him? And she laughed. She said, no, why did you think that? I said, because all those were married and I just didn't know.
Oh my gosh, could you imagine?
Yeah, I just thought it was really, really weird. But I didn't question anything because I didn't think about it. I just put it to the back of my mind because I just didn't think about it. And also because we didn't go to the temple a lot because, we were in Texas, and then they sent us to Italy, then to Germany, and then to Washington, D.C., then to Oklahoma, then to England, back, and then back to America.
Wow, all over the shop. So,
yeah.
Did you, what's the weirdest thing? Because you will have an overview of the church, like you say, throughout Europe, continental Europe, and I've been to church in continental Europe, and it's different to England and Utah, and then outside of Utah in the States is different. So where's the church weirdest?
I don't know, Germany. I think when we were stationed in Germany, we lived in a village. My son was born. Matt was born in Germany, and we had to drive 27 miles to the army base where they had the church. Now you have to this is what I thought was weird, and just anyway, military personnel enlisted and commissioned are not allowed to fraternize. And even though my husband got lots of education when he was in the military, but he wasn't a commissioned officer. He was a non-commissioned officer, so you couldn't mix with them. Which means if you're in a military ward, the bishop is never enlisted. The bishop is always a military officer, right? Or if it's in a town, then it'll be a civilian one.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was awful, And also the head of the auxiliaries, the females, they were married to an officer. So I just thought it was awful, that you had to have that, else you couldn't have your ward, the military ward or your civilian ward, because the military, the non-commissioned officers were always like a step below, so they could be a counsellor in the bishopric, and like I was a counsellor in Relief Society, but the Relief Society president was an officer, major's wife. I just thought that just a lot of discrepancy that really troubled me. I remember going in for an interview with one bishop, and he was a major, a pilot, and he was our bishop. And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm a bit distracted because I've been studying." I said, "Because I'd taken lots and lots of classes, and so had my ex-husband, because he's quite clever." And he said, "I said, what are you studying?" He says, "Oh, your husband will be most familiar with this because one day he'll have to study." I said, "Well, what are you studying?" He says, "Well, I'm studying to take the exam so I could enroll in a master's degree program." I said, "Oh, my husband's already got 2 master's degrees." He was being so condescending, So I just had to say that and bring him down a peg or two.
We've all got a master's degree, Valerie. We just keep it in our back pocket.
I know. It was just, but my husband, he never did get a commission. He's not the most agreeable of persons.
Not a yes man. Not a yes man.
No, he's not a yes man, and he also knows a lot. Like when he's taught lessons, he just lets people know he knows a lot. Anyway, maybe he's changed now. He's married again. I think what I find particularly odd is people talking to you, asking you questions, and not listening to answers.
Yeah.
It seems predominant in the church. Maybe in America more, because I lived there, on and off for 28 years. Because after my ex-husband retired, we had 10, 12 years, permanent all the time without moving. Well, didn't move, but I mean, living in America. And like, Americans might ask a question, especially in the church, but they don't really listen to answers,
Because they didn't.
What I find strange is the hierarchy. Hierarchy?
Yeah.
Like, if you have money, you're at another level, so you get different callings. If you're a military officer, you get, or your family is, you get different callings. If you go on a mission, you're more to be well thought of. If your wife goes on a mission, it's already assumed that you met them on a mission and that you did something on a mission.
Yeah.
So they'd say, "How long were you on your mission?" When I said, "Oh, I went on a mission to Italy," they just give me a funny look and said, "How long were you on a mission?" I said, 2 years. "Oh, you didn't come home early." They had no. They asked peculiar questions, and that say, oh, I thought you met your husband when he was stationed in England. I said, no. I said to one lady, a black lady that was a Christian, I'd say, and I was telling her this, how strange it is, you know, because we got on really well. We were talking about our different churches. And I said, the thing is, people think when me coming from overseas, marrying an American, they think, oh, you met them at church or you met them in a bar. She said to me, well, you might meet them at church, but then you go to the bar afterwards.
Oh dear.
You know, and I think a lot of the what I found strange is they assume, if they don't know you've went on a mission, they assume that you met this person, they got you to join the church, and you did it because you wanted a visa to come to America.
Yeah.
And that's strange. I found I might have had hundreds of questions regarding that. You know, like, well, how quickly did you get your visa? And I said 2 weeks after my husband joined the military. You know,
that
came and took me to the base, and they gave me a green card. 2 weeks.
Yeah, that probably had a little bit to do with it. If he was serving, then they couldn't have it hanging on. You know, waiting. They wanted to send you off wherever they could and get the money's worth out of him.
Yeah.
So
But then you can't get a green card quite as quickly these days.
No, not at all. No. If you'd have rocked up to the airport today with a wedding dress in your luggage, and they'd have seen your little tiara on on the X-ray, I swear to God, you'd be put in a side room immediately, and they'd just stick you on the next boat back. Like,
well, the thing is, when I went to Liverpool to get my visa, one of the questions they asked me was, "Have you ever taken drugs?" And I said, because I'm honest, especially after you come off a mission, you're uber honest.
oh yeah.
You know. And I said, well, actually, I did smoke marijuana once.
Once.
I said that, and immediately I thought, oh shit.
What did they say?
And I said, but you have to remember it was many years ago, and I've just finished a Mormon mission, and we don't take drugs or even drink coffee or alcohol.
You wanted to say,
said, pardon?
You want to say, I'll pee in a cup. I'll pee in a cup.
Yeah. And I said, they said, well, we will issue you a one entrance visit, so you can't go out to the country and come back. You just have to stay there. So if you don't get married, you're going to end up coming home in 6 months. So
yeah.
Okay.
So 28 years married, and then Journal of Discourses, kind of at the same time as your marriage ending, took you out of the church. So what was life for Valerie back in England, following all of that? Where did you go from there?
After I left him and we got the divorce came through when we were in Salt Lake. I was in Salt Lake, and written into the divorce was that I was not allowed to use his last name. So I went from being Valerie Chavera to being Valerie Hoyle again. So when we got here, that was a nightmare because I didn't have any money, and I was sleeping on my dad's floor, and my mother was in a home with Alzheimer's. And it didn't seem to be convenient for my dad. So I went to the council seeing if I could get a house because I'd brought my first daughter and her 2 children with us. So there was a lot of us, right? We had no money. So the council said, no, you don't have a permanent residency or something, the right to habit or something, because my English passport had run out and I only had an American passport, right? So anyway, so I couldn't get housing from the council. And so I'd heard of housing associations, right? So I went into Guinness Trust and said, it's taken them a while to go through my paperwork because I've been away for a while, so that they can okay my housing benefit. So this is 20 years ago, so it was a bit different. So I kind of talked myself into a house, you know. I'm a pretty good talker.
Awesome. I
I
know.
talked into a house before, and I didn't have any housing benefits, so I got a house, no furniture, and no money to pay the rent. So my brother and my two brothers and their wives, they ended up calling people and bringing us some furniture, right? But we still were sleeping on the floor and sleeping on couches. So after a few months, my dad said to me, and I ended up going to court and getting evicted. And I said, well, I'm still waiting for the benefits to kick in, you know, so it's taking them a while. God. And one of the magistrates yelled at Guinness Trust and said, how dare you put this woman through all this what word he used? All this stress, you know, when she's trying her best and she has all these people to take care of.
Yeah, trying to pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
Yeah, there was the bishop at the ward, because I'd go to church occasionally. My sister-in-law, Kath, would call me and say, do you want to ride to church? And I think, yeah. So the bishop at the time was Mike Flynn. And he'd come to me quietly and say, do you need anything? So sometimes he'd pass by, he'd come by the house without telling me and give me £100, you know. I never had to ask him for anything. But anyway, sometimes he'd do that, like once every 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, he'd give me £100. So that's what we lived on. My family didn't seem to be giving us any money to help us, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my dad said, well, what's the problem with the housing and you owing money? I said, because of my British passport. Now, I told him this before, but he says, well, how much do you need? And I said, £60. So he gave me £60. I got my British passport, took it to the housing office. So then they gave me back money and we bought beds. So there was like 7 or 8 of us sleeping on these beds. Then we got the housing, and I tried to get a job. You know, I couldn't get a job. You have to remember, I was only 52 at the time, and I couldn't get a job. And my job in Salt Lake, I'd worked for ZCMI in the showroom, you know, the
shopping centre.
And then I'd worked at University of Utah in distance education, you know, where they study at home, or if they're an athlete, they study away and they send me all the. I worked there, so in distance education. So I had some experience. You know, I couldn't get a job. I even went to University of Manchester, one of them, to get a job to do similar work. And then but I didn't get the job. And I went to the office and they said, the employment office says it's your age.
Yeah.
I said, what do you think? I thought it was illegal for them to do that. It says, yeah, it is illegal, but they do it, and that's why you haven't got a job. So that's why I got benefits. They ended up giving me benefits because of that, you know.
Yeah.
Which was annoying because my intentions of coming back, none of our intentions of coming back was to live off the state. It was to be self-sufficient. We'd always be self-sufficient, you know. But I also brought with me my second daughter, who 6 months before we left Salt Lake had been in this dreadful accident and died twice. So she got rods and things in her body.
Wow.
And she lived in a flat a few doors down, and she's still she's gained a lot of weight, but she's still disabled and can't walk very far. Yeah. And she went to court in Salt Lake to sue the people that hit her in the car. And her, you know who her lawyer was?
Go on. Oaks.
James McConkey.
Another McConkey.
I thought, yeah, you know Curtin McConkey?
Yeah.
That's the guy. And we thought getting him, he would be honest, you know, and she'd get money from this. She got not a penny.
Wow.
Yeah. She was in LDS Hospital in Salt Lake, but her insurance didn't cover that. So the third day they sent her to University of Utah Hospital because I worked there and that was my insurance. So when it got to $500,000, her care, because that was my cutoff, my insurance, they put her on my ex-husband's insurance through the military because she was under 25.
Okay.
That cut off at $500,000. So now she owes. Now her medical care came to $1 million. She couldn't get money from suing the people that hit her because they said it was 50-50 in Utah, 50-50 blame in accidents, you know.
Yeah.
So she went on Medicaid and then she came back here. So
wow.
See, a lot goes on in life, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But you have to not let it drag you down, because what you're going to do, you know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can't let the bastards grind you down.
Yeah, and then he, the one that had the accident, became he, transgender, but not going through the whole thing. And I said to my sister-in-law, no, Susie is not Susie anymore. She's Aaron.
Okay.
And my sister-in-law said, what? And I said, yeah, she's transgender. And my sister-in-law says, well, tell her I will pay for her.
How rude.
Yeah. But she looked to me, and I don't think she realized what she was saying.
No.
Because I don't think sometimes they realize what they're saying.
Yeah, I think yeah, I've got a lot of Mormon family who are probably praying for me, and they don't realize that I'm saying spells for them as well at night, that they'll change their behavior.
Yeah. But if they say things, I just say, well, that's kind of you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, because you know it's not going to make any difference if you pick a fight.
No. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It was, yeah, you took us all over the place, from brethren in your home to the ins and outs of military life in Germany and the way that the church dealt with that, to being trafficked to Seattle, then Salt Lake, to become a Mormon wife. And I had no idea, genuinely, before this interview, how colourful your life had actually been. But I think we are all better for spending an hour with you this evening.
Well, thank you. I think it's kind of been therapeutic for me.
Yeah, and that's what Priesthood Dispatches is all about, just giving everyone the opportunity to just get it out there, because sometimes people, I think, when you're not around church people all the time, other people think, well, Mormons, they're lovely people, but they don't realize maybe how varied and colorful a life within Mormonism can actually be. And I think when you start telling them, they're not very bothered.
Yeah.
But being able to talk about it with people that understand, that get you, is therapeutic.
Yeah, it is, because you don't often meet people that you can relate to.
Yeah, and that are willing,
especially when you live on a housing estate.
Yeah. Yes, no, absolutely. Awesome. So that was Valerie, all the way from Rochdale to Salt Lake via Italy, Germany, England again, Seattle, and all over the place. Thank you, Valerie, for sharing your story with us. As always, if you enjoyed this story, you can give me a call and we'll go through yours. Valerie found it quite therapeutic. Everyone has a story and they are all worth sharing. If you feel you can support the podcast, please do so using the link in the description below. But for now, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.